ballot today. It'll be in pretty soon. For the 34th District, I'm Rick Keller. I'm the chair of the Government Advocacy Committee for the West Seattle Chamber of Commerce. I would like to introduce Lynn Dennis, our CEO. And Pete Spalding, the serving chair. Pete?
Thanks everybody for coming tonight. The West Seattle Chamber of Commerce is known for its advocacy for its members. Over the last several years, your chamber has taken to the forefront many issues that are impacting our community, from hosting forums on current issues, to providing events like tonight's to let our members get to know the candidates running to represent us in various legislative offices, having members serving on various boards and commissions to advocate for stronger business positions, hosting our first ever job fair, our second recycling event, along with our neighborhood street cleanup activities. As you can see, your West Seattle Chamber is out in the community seeking to make West Seattle a place for all of our residents to call home. It is important that our voice be heard on issues large and small which impact our West Seattle community. This is even more important as we have several huge issues on the horizon in this coming year. A decision will be made about light rail coming to the peninsula, resetting of the Move Seattle levy, and how that could impact an additional rapid ride line and other transit options, and fast-moving initiatives from our city government. Our community voice is bigger, bolder, and more effective when there are more businesses and individuals behind that voice. Take this as your invitation to join the conversation and become a member of the West Seattle Chamber of Commerce. Your West Seattle Chamber of Commerce is celebrating 95 years representing this community, and now is the time to become involved to help shape the next 95 years.
I'd like to thank the DAV and especially Nate for hosting us tonight, and I'm going to let Nate say a word, please.
Thank you. Welcome the Chamber of Commerce to our facility, their guests to our facility, and of course, candidates to our facility. The DAV is here to help veterans gain the benefits that they have earned. Most veterans don't understand what their benefits are, and it's our job to educate them and then assist them in gaining their benefits. The DAV, this building, has been here as a DAV facility since 1956. I was born up at the junction and raised in West Seattle, and I didn't know it was here until 2 years ago, like most people in the community. We've recently remodeled it, and we want to open it up to events like this as much as we can. So welcome to our facility.
I would like to thank Leslie Harris, President of the Seattle School Board, for joining us this evening. And we'll get into it. The 34th District's northern border is approximately the Bremerton Ferry Line. It includes West Seattle, White Center, Burien, and the entirety of Vashon Island. It is famously the site of the Maury Island incident, where a crashing UFO killed a dog and injured a 13-year-old boy in 1947, 2 days before Kenneth Arnold's historic sighting. Things I found out today. All eligible candidates were invited. These happy people elected to come. As we go, I'll give everyone 2 minutes to introduce yourselves, and then we'll go straight to questions. We'll begin on the left, so Joe, you'll go first, and then we'll go down the line, and then the first person answering will also follow down. Is that okay? Is that clear?
Yeah.
All right. So, Joe, please.
Can you hear me okay? Is that all right? Yeah, so I'm Joe Nguyen. I was actually born and raised here. My parents were refugees from Vietnam, and they were fleeing an oppressive regime there, and were able to settle here because of public housing. So I was born in White Center. My family moved to Burien a little while later. My father was actually in a car accident when we were there, and we experienced a health crisis that really decimated our family finances. And because of that, the community actually supported us, and through that we were able to thrive. So having access to public housing, having access to healthcare, and having access to public education, my family and I now live in West Seattle. So I always joke that I need to move to Vashon for like 6 months, so that way I can live in every part of the district. I'm very honored, very thankful for being here, and wanted to say I appreciate all the work that you do at the DAV.
Hi, Hi, I'm Shannon Braddock. I'm also a candidate for the 34th District State Senate seat, and I really appreciate the Chamber inviting us to be here today. I appreciate the DAV for hosting, and I really appreciate you all for being here to hear from us, because that, of course, is the base of our democracy is these ballots that have come out this week. And so I appreciate you all being here and appreciate that you will all be voters in this upcoming election. A little bit about myself. I am a mom to 3 kids, who have been through, well, 2 are still in Seattle Public Schools, 1 just graduated high school, so that's kind of exciting. And I am a mom who works outside of the home as well. And so I believe bringing that perspective to the state Senate is an important one to bring. I think we have seen that women, and I would argue moms in particular, can be very effective at moving legislation and at really talking about very progressive and important legislation as it relates to income inequities, issues related to child care, issues related to affordability, and I'm excited about this opportunity to be a part of that. I also have had for the past 8 years experience in public service working at King County, working for 6 years as Chief of Staff to Joe McDermott at the King County Council, and he has that district also serves much of the 34th, Vashon-Maury Island, White Center, and then of course parts of Burien and West Seattle. And so I feel I have a great grasp, and I've worked with many folks and residents from those areas, and I'm excited to continue that work at the State Senate. I currently work for Dow Constantine as his Deputy Chief of Staff. And again, I would say that one of the things that sets me apart is the fact that I have been working on effective, progressive legislation in a bipartisan body for all of this time. And I think that means that I really will be ready to lead on day 1 should I be elected. I've also been very active in the community, currently on the board of Westside Baby, previously the board of the West Seattle Food Bank. I was active in at the Lafayette PTA, was their legislative representative, and also with the 34th District Democrats. And I'm really proud to have a wide variety of endorsements from many of those folks. Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Sophia Aragon, a Senate candidate for the 34th Legislative District, and I get to run today because of the opportunities I had growing up in the Seattle area. I attended Seattle Public Schools, I graduated from the University of Washington. I actually enjoyed really great health benefits thanks to my mother's union job. And in addition, affordable housing was such an incredible opportunity when we first came here. My grandmother and my mother actually cobbled together enough money to buy a 4-bedroom home just 2 years after we moved here from the Philippines, just in time for my sister to be born, which I tell people that story and they can't imagine that happening today. I was a registered nurse in South Seattle in the community where I grew up. And I became a patient advocate, and I really saw firsthand how decisions in Olympia directly impacted our patient care and how much we can give. So I decided to take that patient advocacy to Olympia, and I earned a law degree. And I spent a decade in Olympia being an advocate on major issues such as full implementation of the Affordable Care Act in the state of Washington. So I talk about my immigrant experience and seeing how my parents fully utilize the opportunities here, but it's a dangerous time for immigrant communities. And I think for Seattle to be a real world-class city, we need to embrace diversity. So unlike when I was growing up, students are straddled with debt from higher education. Health benefits, people still don't have access to it and are dying unnecessarily. And we have a homelessness crisis. So that's why I'm running for office, to change that.
Thanks. Can you guys hear me? I do, but I have the microphone over there. Thanks. So I'm Lois Schipper, and I'm also running for the state Senate seat in the 34th Ledge District. I actually did not grow up here, but have lived in West Seattle and White Center for the last 25 years. I grew up in Ohio as the daughter of a small business owner. We loaded the truck. We got stuff delivered to our garage, which was a warehouse, loaded the truck, went on the truck with my dad, and when he broke his arm, I helped drive the truck. I was old enough, I had a driver's license. First time driving a stick shift. So I feel like I do, and my mom kept the books, and we grew up understanding the importance of business and what we needed to do as a family to support that business. I am now a nurse. I graduated from Ohio State with a nursing degree and then went back and got a public health degree. I've worked with King County Public Health for most of the last 25 years and recently moved over to Seattle Children's. But in my work in public health, I managed the White Center Public Health Center, which served West Seattle, White Center, and Burien. I've done visits to all of the communities that are in the 34th as a public health nurse, and worked on the White Center Early Learning Initiative, which was really helping give kids the right start early in life so that they were kindergarten ready and could achieve in school, graduate, and go on to lead a full life. So I'd be really honored to represent you all in Olympia. I think I've had a lot of on-the-ground experience. I ran the Highline School District Bond and Levy campaign for about 10 years, passed multiple successful bond and levies as the chair of that organization. And that really gave me some insight into school funding. So I'd really like to bring this experience to Olympia. I have seen legislators do incredible work. Ruth Cagey started the Department of Early Learning. She would meet with us at Public Health regularly to say what's working, what's not, what can I do to make things better, and she would go sponsor bills and get more services, money, and programs on the ground for families and children, and especially around early learning. So that really inspired me to want to see what I can bring to Olympia and make things better for the families and kids in our neighborhood.
I'd like to thank Pete Bowling and the DAV for putting this on. My name is Len Charleston. I currently run for the 34th District Senate as well. I was born and raised here in Seattle. I lived in West Seattle for about 21 years. I'm an IAM union steward. I was that for about 20 years, and in that I worked in Olympia and around the state doing different things to help our unions and things out. I was also a pastor at the United House of Prayer for 16 years, where I was the A. Philip Randolph Pastor of the Year in 2000. I also served on the Employees Community Fund, which is a philanthropic group that takes care of the homeless and the impoverished and different things up and down the Puget Sound corridor. I work on the Martin Luther King Celebrations Committee, which is the oldest one in the state. I'm married. Got two little guys that are running around here somewhere. One of them's little, one of them thinks he's big. But I'm also a United States Marine, where I learned a lot of stuff over the years. But I'm running because I see that we're starting to go backwards on some things. And I think we need to change a lot of things here. I think there's some things that need to be fixed. I think there's some things that we need just fresh blood and fresh understanding on, and a different perspective on the way we're going here in West Seattle. You've got homeless complaining about not having a home. You've got the wealthy complaining about property taxes too high. Our environment is suffering. We can't chop it to bits like we're doing right now to make room for different things. What I'd like to see done is our homeless situation taken care of. Our teachers get better competitive salaries so that they can at least live in the city that they teach in. I'd like us to all have a better understanding of what we're up against as far as how to pave these bumpy roads and fix the things all around us. And it'd be an absolute privilege to represent the interests of the 34th District as your state senator.
Thank you very much. So we're going to go into the questions. They're in categories. No surprise, the first one that was most asked about was homelessness. So my first question, and I'm going to start with you, Shannon, since you spoke first, and then we'll go.
So this is a minute and a half.
Minute and a half, please. No single city or county has the resources to solve homelessness on its own. What do you propose as a statewide effort to solve homelessness?
Thank you. Yes, and I think that's true, and I think it touches on the fact that the homeless problem is so complex. I think some people feel that if you just build enough shelter, you will solve the homeless problem, or if we just address affordable housing, we will solve the homeless problem. Those are all things that we need to do and a part of the solution, but it involves so many pieces. And I think at the state level, one thing we particularly need to focus on is addressing some of the root causes that include, of course, behavioral health issues, that include the fact that we don't do a good enough job of providing resources to people as they transition out of either jail or like Western State or any of the other recovery programs. We simply have them step out of those programs and then off they go without really enough case management to help them manage being able to be housed, stably housed, after they successfully leave those kinds of programs. So I would like to see the state put more resources, in particular, into behavioral health issues. I want to make sure we're maintaining the document recording fees that help to fund housing, that we are maintaining the Housing Trust Fund as well. And I think another thing we need to do is really have a specific committee or committee at the state Senate that addresses housing and affordable addresses affordable housing and homelessness issues in particular within that umbrella, as opposed to having it be addressed in all of these different committees, addressing zoning, addressing legal requirements, addressing social services. I want to see us have an umbrella committee that will specifically begin responding to this in a more holistic way.
Homelessness and affordable housing is one of my top priorities. I'm on the board of the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance. And one of the things that a good legislator would do is not leave money on the table when it's available. Last year, the Housing Trust Fund was part of the capital budget, and for the first time in the legislature's history, they did not pass it on time. And they left on the table $200 million of federal funds. And by the way, federal funds are the vast majority of funding for affordable housing and homelessness across the country. So number one, don't let that happen. And also, for me, I would like to see permanent housing, because you see models around the city and this county where, for example, Greenbridge, where if we provide permanent housing or the Downtown Emergency Services Center, there often will be mental health services, medical services, etc. So the other piece specifically for the district is I would like to explore and look more closely, is there underutilized property that we can look at to provide mixed and affordable housing? So those are the things that I would like to do as a legislator. And of course, as an asset to our local economy is bring in those funds from the state to really help target that issue. Thank you.
Ready?
I'm waiting on you.
Okay, I was waiting on you. So I think homelessness is a multifaceted issue. You can't just do one thing to solve it. I think we need to look at regional solutions as we close camps, unsanctioned camps in Seattle. Where do folks go? They move down the road. Auburn has a problem. Burien has a problem. We need to work collectively so that we're all working together to solve the problem. I also think we need this, as a state senator, I would work to fund more services. I worked as a public health nurse, serving, doing home visits with substance-using pregnant women. And when folks are ready to go to treatment, you want to take advantage of that opportunity. We would hear, that's great, we'll assess them, there's not a bed for 40 days. We miss that window, and then people are back on the street, they're back using, and we've missed that window to get them into services. Mental health services, behavioral health services, we certainly could do with more of those. There's a long way to get folks into those services right now. So I think that's the state role, but the state can also support regional solutions to homelessness. And I think the root causes of homelessness go back to early learning and adverse childhood experiences. And if we invest, so it's a both and, we need to invest and help the folks who are on the street right now, but we also need to invest in early learning and early on so that we support positive brain development and healthy brain development, so we aren't serving those folks in homeless camps when they're 50 years old.
Being a pastor for quite a while, we put together groceries and we serve the homeless ourselves. We got to talk with them down under the bridges, in the roadways in Seattle. We got to hear their stories of how they got there. And there is multifaceted reasons that they got there. Some of it have been by their own volition, some of them due to job loss, some of them due to circumstances out of their control. It's a moral decay that's going on, and it's really, really disgusting in our city to have billionaires in one spot and homeless in another spot. And they aren't all young people. Some of them are our age, and they have no place to live. And it's tough in the heat, and it's crazy in the winter. There are people that are out counting them, and some of them freeze to death at night. As far as homeless, the remedy for it, I think the biggest thing we need to do is understand it. You know, there are homeless camps, like Second Chance there, just off of Myers Way. People want, if they can get into a decent camp without drugs and alcohol, and then move into low-income housing, and then move into regular housing. We have to have state funds and budgets for that. I know that if we set up a state bank like they do in North Dakota, we'd be able to have our own funds to take care of that. Homelessness is a responsibility of all of us. I don't know about you guys, but I don't like seeing blue tents and blue tarps up and down the road. Not because it's hard to look at, but because people are suffering and people are struggling. And you just have to imagine what happens when they get sick, or their child gets cold, or they cut and they hurt themselves. They don't have the same benefits that we do. So we do all have to look out for one another.
Yes, I actually serve an organization called Wellspring Family Services that works with family homelessness specifically. I'm the associate board chair there. So we actually work with a lot of families experiencing housing insecurity. The interesting thing about how we're trying to solve homelessness right now is that oftentimes it's a monolith. I think a lot of the candidates have already said it. You can't treat family homelessness the same as opioid addiction, as the same as other issues as well, like mental health. So there certainly needs to be a targeted solution in terms of how we address that. However, knowing that this is a chamber conversation, it is more cost effective to keep people housed than it is to take them out of homelessness. So when we work with families, we know that it's cheaper to keep them housed. We need to invest in programs like the health and homeless and emergency services to make sure that we stem the flow of homelessness, so that way we can actually get a handle on the folks who are actually homeless now. I think that's the first one, is fixing the root cause. A lot of it, we actually worked to pass legislation last year to work with adverse childhood experiences, House Bill 2861, where Lois mentioned children that experience trauma at a very early age have a different development in terms of their brain, which causes propensities for other things that are negative. So we need to treat the root causes of homelessness. The leading cause of family homelessness is actually domestic violence, and also making sure that we have the support we need for families and the folks that are out there as well.
Thank you. Next question, starting with Sophia. What proposals do you have for addressing the state shortcomings to mental health care?
Well, mental health care has been sorely not attended to in comparison to physical health care. So there are a lot of efforts right now so that we have what we call integration, so that when you see, if you get health care for any kind of physical ailment, they make sure that they set you as well for mental health care. I think that we need to make better investments in mental health. So a lot of questions comes up about the state hospital, okay, and them losing their certification because of safety issues. Well, there needs to be investment to make sure that we have patient safety in those acute care facilities. And also along the spectrum, there are people who also need help in their communities, mental health in their communities. So we need to make sure that we have robust acute care, mental health for those in crisis, as well as those in the community as well.
So I can tell you, I work at Seattle Children's right now, and the unit that is the fullest at Seattle Children's on a regular basis and has kids boarding in the ER is the mental health unit. And it's distressing to see 9, 10, 11-year-olds coming in with mental health concerns and needing to be hospitalized for that. So I think it's a both and. We need to have more services on the ground. We need to have more access, and I do think the Affordable Care Act has done a great job of asking folks when they assess physical health to assess behavioral health and mental health. We've seen lots of co-location now where mental health services are embedded in community clinics. If you look at Neighbor Care with Valley Cities up north, you look at Neighbor Care down south, or Health Point down south has Valley Cities on site, and I can tell you, as a public health nurse, I worked in both of those clinics, and you can take somebody who you assess today in need of services, walk them up, and get them into an assessment same day. So those kinds of co-located, accessible services are really important. I don't have an answer to Western State. I don't know if throwing more money at it is the answer, but those are some of the hardest to serve folks in the state struggling with mental health issues. And I think we need to do whatever we can to support the staff that are staying there. They're hanging in there. And whatever we can do to support them, to give them the resources and the support and opportunities that they need to make things better there, I would be behind legislation to support that.
Well, as a legislator and a senator, I would advocate that we looked at mental illness as you would look at polio or MS or any other disease or sickness, and not try to treat it as an exotic illness that's all its own. It needs the same benefits. We need the same type of help. The military's done a pretty good job after they finally really recognized PTSD as a disorder that military folks suffered from. And if you've ever had known anyone that was shell-shocked or was concerned about it being shot at or bombed, you would see how it really affects the mind. I remember our first encounter with PTSD. We were running a mock attack on one of our bases while we were in B school. And we were out there with some Vietnam vets, and us students were standing around. We thought the F-4 Phantoms were cool because they were flying so low and so fast. We didn't understand that by the time you saw the airplane, your base was destroyed. We saw PTSD in action when we were standing outside the building. They told us to exit the building. This is what you do during a normal drill. And one of the sergeant instructors hit the ground. As a youngster who didn't understand PTSD, we didn't understand that he hit the ground because he'd experienced that in Vietnam. PTSD takes over physically when you don't have any control over it. The effects of mental illness, those folks don't have a whole lot of control over it. They've had things in their lives to run them in that direction, and they end up homeless, they end up suffering. It's the responsibility of our state to be able to address that. Just like the military's been able to address it, I think we can emulate them as well.
I think a couple of folks brought up Western State. For folks that don't know, that place just lost its accreditation, which means it also lost a lot of funding as well, which doesn't help at all in terms of trying to work with mental health crisis that we have in Washington State. Part of the reason for why they lost their accreditation was actually because they were, I don't know if understaffed is the right term, they had a lot of turnover because the work environment for the folks that were there was not necessarily advantageous. In order to fund health crisis that we have in Washington State, we need to make sure that the providers themselves are getting paid a livable wage. They have the breaks and the resources they need to have their own mental health care be required and taken care of. And we do need to invest in those organizations that help promote healthcare workers in the mental health field. So in my mind, it's a one-on-one relationship with providers and making sure that those providers themselves don't get burnt out and are able to actually give the attention and quality care that they need for the folks experiencing the trauma.
I think, as with everything, the earlier we can address and prevent, I will use the word prevent, issues, the more economical it's going to be for our state. So one place I would also want to focus a lot of energy for both education and helping to provide a resource to get to treatment would actually be in our schools. I think we have clearly seen an uptick in anxiety levels in our young students. We've seen an uptick in suicides in young kids. And I think training and helping parents and children understand how to identify mental illness and the range of mental illnesses and the ways that they can be addressed is really important, and making it not as Lynn put it, an exotic disease, but rather just an understanding it is one piece of all of our health care, right? All of us experience mental health, all of us experience physical health, and I think we need to continue to educate and advocate. And as if I were elected to be your state senator, I would be somebody standing up talking about these issues. We lost a close family friend to suicide when she was just 15, so this has always been something very close to my heart as an issue. And I would say that we need to make sure that we are taking those resources and we are providing some flexibility with how folks address it. Our Best Starts for Kids program has had some great success in this because it gives caseworkers our Best Starts for Kids work at the King County because it gives caseworkers flexibility to understand what a particular individual or family's issue is so that they can help connect them with resources. And I would push that kind of thing at the state level as well.
Thank you. Lois, to you, the final question on homelessness. What do you intend to do to clean up the encampments throughout the district?
I do think we need to move folks out of the unsanctioned encampments in a safe way. We look at they closed the encampment on Airport Way. The folks that were under the bridge in the jungle moved out and moved into Airport Way. And they were there for a long time, and they didn't close it until they heard that a 16-year-old girl had been raped by multiple other residents in the camp. We don't want to wait. They just pulled a 5-month-old baby out of the camp at I-90 and I-5. We don't want to wait until we're hearing bad stories like that. We want to see how we can get people into services. I do think we need to have more access to low barrier shelters. If you bring folks in, not a lot, I don't know who's out there on the streets right now, but many folks are suffering from substance abuse, opioid addiction, or mental health issues. If you tell them you have to be clean and sober or you got to be able to behave when you walk in the door, they're not able to do that today. If we bring them in the door and build that relationship with them, the Salvation Army does a great job at that work, other folks do a great job at that work, then we build a relationship and get them access and connection to those services that they need. That's a proven model, housing first. If you house somebody and give them that stability, then you can work on the issues that are making them homeless and keeping them on the street. So that would be my strategy.
Same question.
what would we do to clean that up was I encourage them to understand that they don't have to live in a lawless environment. A lot of us don't understand what a lawless environment really looks like because we live in homes with locked doors. We live in neighborhoods that police patrol. Or the places that Lois is talking about in the jungle are places that are off the side of the freeway that don't have fences, they don't have houses, they have tents and they have tarps. And anybody or any animal can come into those at any time. We need to give them a place where they can say, hey, look, here are the rules that I need to abide by. Show them the rules they need to abide by to live in an encampment like Second Chance just off of Myers Way, to where they're fenced in, the city has taken and graveled the road, and people have volunteered to build tiny houses for them. Let them understand that they can have security and safety, and let them know that they and their children will benefit from it. You know, it's a sad thing. I have young children in school, and it's really, really heart-wrenching to find out that they're going to school with people who are homeless, with children who don't have an actual home. They may have a P.O. box. You know, when I was growing up, I'm old, but I don't remember I don't remember homelessness as an issue like it is right now. And those of us that can do something about it, we are our brother's keeper. We are one another's keeper. I don't know about you, and I'm pretty sure you feel bad about it, but to have a child suffering from homelessness is heart-wrenching because they can't do anything about it except for live in it and suffer from it. We owe them more than what we're giving them right now.
Yeah, it's obviously a very tough issue. Honestly, I don't think sweeps of encampments necessarily work just because oftentimes they'll just end up coming back. What we do need to do is make sure that we have more of a personal relationship and develop a relationship with folks who are there. A lot of times when the sweeps happen, it's kind of the day before they're told, and then somebody comes in and takes all their stuff away. It's not very humane. What I would suggest is having more resources for navigation teams that then go in advance, help them get the services in advance, build a relationship so that way it's not necessarily an oppressive type of relationship when we come in and take their stuff away. So a lot of it for me is making sure that we treat them as humans because they are, and that we provide resources to make sure that they get the services that they need and not just have a one-shot solution.
I think the state needs to partner with our region, with the cities and King County, to really work on trying to provide 24/7 shelters that provide more, because a lot of folks don't want to leave those encampments because they feel they don't have a safe place to go. They feel they're worried about getting bed bugs. They're worried about getting their stuff stolen. There might be, someone that they're nervous to come across it within the system. And so creating more 24/7 shelter is vital. And the state can step up and do that by helping to look at some surplus land, some possibilities for siting, and then of course, with resources as well, again, for caseworkers who can come in and help to navigate that system. But I think 24/7 is absolutely the model we need to be approaching. And I would also highlight, Seattle really had a groundbreaking facility at 1811 East Lake, run by DESC, that is not a sober living environment, but it is a place where folks can go who are still abusing alcohol, who are still in need for hopefully reaching out to and getting treatment. And they've had great success there in getting to folks, in getting them treatment, and keeping them housed. And again, I think that is the kind of model we need to continue putting our dollars toward. We have seen through research and data outcomes that those are absolutely the best models to follow for shelter and the way to get folks out of unsanctioned encampments.
I absolutely believe that we should not be we shouldn't be promoting temporary encampments. I am for permanent housing. I know that people don't have that choice right now, but when you talk specifically about the health hazard of trash and debris where people live, that's an absolute public health hazard, not only to the residents, as we know, but for the neighborhoods and people around them. And that's not the way that we want people to live. In other countries where they haven't gotten under control their homelessness issue, people will turn a blind eye and not letting them live in places where it's dangerous with debris and filth is it's a symptom that people aren't looking, right, that they turn a blind eye to them. So as I've said before, that I think permanent facilities tend to have these services that people with homelessness need: mental health, physical health, other services. So that's what I'm aiming toward. And I'll say too that what it shows in Seattle is that we see an uptick in homelessness because of the skyrocketing rents in the city. So what it's also talking about is how unaffordable the city has become, and that's something that we need to talk about as well.
Thank you. The current senator is Sharon Nelson. I reached out to her and asked her to submit a few questions coming from her insight to the job. Her first question, what type of background do you have that would make you successful in Olympia, which can be a hyper-partisan environment? What experience do you have in a legislative setting?
The background that I have from my upbringing, I was raised by a Sunday school teacher and a Teamster, and union goes all the way back to my great uncle. So there was a form of discipline that was set up to treat other people correctly, not just as you'd be treated, but as best you possibly can. And as I grew up, I got to see that because my mother was also a Girl Scout leader, and I got to see how to treat people and how to watch young people raised from different families, different backgrounds, different ethnicities. So you treat everyone the same. As a United States Marine, there was only one color. And they used to tell us if we got into a scuffle with someone from another ethnicity, so we got two kinds of Marines. We got dark green and we got light green. Well, we're all green Marines, and we should treat one another that way. As a legislator, I would look at everybody as the same. As a legislator, I understand that as a senator, I would be merely just a needle. The public is the thread that helps us sew up the problems in our community. Without the help of the community behind a legislator, the legislator can't just go in and have all the answers by themselves. They need the entire community. This entire district can go to the senator and say, hey, how about this idea? How about that idea? And we can investigate that and bring that back. You might send one of us to the Senate, but all of us are going to need all of you when we go to the Senate. And as a legislator, you have to keep that in mind, that you have 120,000 people that are part of that thread that'll help your needle stitch things up.
Yeah, so I've actually helped pass legislation this past year for trauma-informed care like we spoke about. A lot of it is not just relationship building, but also informing and giving perspectives as well. A lot of times when legislation is being crafted and being built, they get a lot of consensus from various organizations and various people. In my mind, one of the most important things for a representative in our state leg is having perspective, especially with the lived experiences and shared values of the people that are here. So for instance, the 34th Legislative District, despite including White Center and West Seattle and Burien, very diverse places, has never had a person of color ever in the history of the 34th. So one of it is also making sure that when we talk to our partners in the state legislature, we're also making sure that we're giving the perspectives of the whole community and being very clear that we're talking about the whole community as well. So obviously compromise is very important. I think some of the skills that would serve me well in the state leg is I actually don't need to sleep very much because they have a very condensed schedule. But also, this stuff is actually fun for me. So I do enjoy reading policy. I do enjoy going through the wonkiness of the legislation in itself.
I was a stay-at-home parent, mostly, on and off for about 10 years, and when I decided to get back into the workforce, it was after I'd gone back and gotten my graduate degree in public administration from the Evans School. It took me 7 years to get that degree because I had 3 kids, well, 2 and then 3 kids. And I'm really proud of having that degree and that work that I did as a parent who was the primary caregiver getting that education. So that led me to a career in public service. So while I have always been very engaged in my community throughout the years, my jobs for the past 8 years have involved working at King County, a bipartisan environment. I've had great experiences with actually a community member from Vashon coming to our office when I was Chief of Staff to Joe McDermott, where I'll also highlight he was the budget chair, and I helped to be the lead staff there to navigate an $11 billion biennial budget in a bipartisan setting. But a Vashon resident came to us and said, why can't we pay late property taxes partially? Because there was a state law that said our assessor couldn't do that, couldn't accept payments for late property taxes unless it was the full payment. And obviously this causes a great deal of issues for folks who are in that position. We worked with Senator Sharon Nelson, with the rest of our legislative team in Olympia, with our assessor to come up with a solution. It took about 1.5 years. It took a while to actually do it, but it was fantastic and a great example of how community steps up, and when you effectively know how to work with those stakeholders, to talk with the community, to talk with the elected folks in a bipartisan fashion, that great things can actually happen.
I worked for over a decade in Olympia, first with the state agency, Department of Health, which is really key in terms of understanding the unique way government actually funds its services and flows down to the community. And I was also an advocate as a governmental affairs director for the Nurses Association at the time when we were debating health reform. So that made sure, for example, when putting together a model healthcare plan for the state, that all women's services, for example, were all adopted and intact. And we also had a number of legislation around workplace safety and also defending higher cuts to higher education. One of the things that I saw over time is that when I began as the governmental affairs director, we had a supermajority Democrat Senate, House, and governor's office, meaning that in order for me to obtain the votes to pass a piece of legislation, I really didn't have to talk to Republicans because there were so few of them that I didn't need their votes. Well, that wasn't a good habit to keep because the legislature, the margins got more narrow, and then finally the Senate turned Republican. And then I had to learn how do you reach across the aisle and find out some common ground. Like everyone cares about health, everyone cares about education, and finding those areas in which you can work together. So that's something that I was happy to achieve as governmental affairs of the Nurses Association.
So I have not worked as a legislator before, but I've been working for the last probably 20 years, going to Olympia and talking to our legislators about what's important, particularly in our district, for things around public health, early learning, more services for low-income moms and kids, the school issues. I ran the Bond and Levy Committee in Highline for 10 years, and so went down and lobbied. I was the PTA Ledge Chair. So all that to say that those experiences are what make me want to go to Olympia and do the good work that our legislators have been doing. They've been reaching out to us, bringing us to Olympia, not only to lobby on issues that are important to us, educate in the case of public health because we're government employees, so we can't lobby, and then also inform them and testify as needed before committees. I've testified a number of times in Olympia. And that inspires me as a community member to know that I can come to this community and say, what's important to you? I'm your representative in Olympia. You tell me what we can do, what needs to be done in a better way, what are your priorities, and bring that to the table and tell our story. And I feel like I have the experience, having worked on the ground in our district from one end to the other for the last 25 years, to bring that message to Olympia and inspire others to understand the investments in early learning, how that can make a difference, and the return on investment that you get for that, rather than investing late in life to solve healthcare problems then.
Thank you. So, Joe, we're with you now?
Yeah.
So we're moving on to transit and transportation. And these questions are from a questionnaire that we asked the chamber at large. So these aren't necessarily my words, but they're words of our constituency. How do we prepare for a future where more people will be moving to the area, but the roads are already gridlocked?
That's why we need mass transit in West Seattle now. We need to make sure that we have the funding and infrastructure in place to make that happen as soon as possible. I get that there's plans already in place for like 15 years for now, but things like making sure, so for instance, I support a state bank. I think a couple of us support state banks. And the reason why we do that is because right now we send about $2.2 billion to Wall Street every single year in interest, just straight up interest that we pay somebody else. If we had our own state bank, we could harvest some of those gains and actually put that towards infrastructure projects. Not only that, we can actually fund our own infrastructure projects, so we don't have to wait for Wall Street to grant us more money in order to be able to build. So obviously we need more funding. We needed it like 40 years ago when we gave that money to Atlanta instead. But in lieu of that, I think we need to have more funding for infrastructure to be built, specifically in West Seattle.
Yes, absolutely. I think obviously the ST3 work to get light rail here to West Seattle is huge. And I know there are stakeholders from the West Seattle Chamber in the group working with that. We are trying to speed that up the best that we can. But there are genuine engineering issues around how you can navigate the building of it. So we're doing what we can and trying to partner with other communities throughout the city to make sure we're as coordinated as we can possibly be on that. And I would also say that it's going to be very important for us to continue to address our state highways, we have a project with 509 and making sure that 509 infrastructure is also actually holding up. We're seeing a lot more folks use that as an option for moving north and south. And the state has partnered, again, with the county, with other cities, to try to be sure that we are leveraging dollars the best that we can. This is another place where any opportunities for federal matching grants for issues, having an understanding of Tiger grants that might be available, having an inventory of our bridges so that we are making sure that that kind of infrastructure is in place is just vitally important. And then again, also continuing to support what we have, which is a pretty fantastic, actually, bus system in this region that is a regional system. And I think it's important that it stays regional and that we do the best work that we can do to try to make sure we are also serving the needs of our more rural communities and the folks that are indeed outside of our densest urban areas, who are the ones so often traveling back and forth to get either to work or to visit other spots within the more dense areas of our city. So we also need to continue focusing and partnering on our bus system as well.
So many of the problems that we talked about before can't be solved without talking about transportation. When I'm talking to voters out there, they absolutely do agree that we need to find better ways to handle the dense population that's coming into the district. In King County alone, we have 1,000 people moving in here every single week. So I completely agree that the pace that we are moving projects along simply isn't fast enough for everyday people who simply need to get from home to work and back again. So we just need to move faster. We've tried incremental approaches from the city and county, and so there needs to be a stronger partnership and work with the state so that we have that infrastructure so that people can move where they need to go.
So I've been a bike commuter for about 20 years, both to downtown Seattle, and now I'm a bike commuter to Children's Hospital from West Seattle, from White Center. I rely heavily on light rail. I bike downtown, put my bike on light rail, get off, and bike to Children's at the other end. That works for me. I think we need to look at how we put systems together that work for the people that are trying to get from one place to the other. Children's has a great transportation program. I get paid every day I don't drive my car. So that public-private partnership where we incentivize people getting out of their cars and onto transit, we need to have the transit for them to get onto. Buses are full. When you get on buses now, light rail is very full at rush hour, going and coming. But I think we need to look at those solutions that bring people from their neighborhoods closer to transit and then transit into the main hubs where they're working, and then incentivize that. At Children's, like I said, I get paid every day that I don't drive my car. That's a huge incentive. I get excited when I fill out my little sheet that says, I rode my bike today, I did not drive my car. So I think we do need more buses. And then we need transit to come to West Seattle. Light transit is, I love it. I use it every day.
You know, I find it ironic that back in 2011, the Chamber of Commerce asked the same question. And we're still struggling with that answer. We know that 57 people a day move into the Seattle area. It's a hot place to live. Everybody likes it here. We complain about the rain. We know the average child can describe 132 different colors of gray, but it is still a hot place to live. We know that a lot of people in West Seattle commute to downtown. We know that we need either a light rail system or better busing routes or better buses or, like you said, some incentive to take other than your car downtown, because at some point here in the very near future, parking is going to be non-existent. We'll be paying the prices that they pay in New York to park your car. You'll be buying monthly parking passes that cost a fortune. We need to look at different ways of funding a better transportation system to downtown Seattle where most people work. I work in Renton. I'm not going to bike to Renton.
Oh, come on. I'll be your bike buddy.
Thank you. But I see that we're going to start branching in both directions. As the city gets more crowded and we know the numbers, then we ought to make provisions for transportation to take those numbers to different places in the city. This is a hot place to live. It's not going to get any cooler. Housing prices are still $770,000 for houses, but people are still coming here. So it's obvious that we need the city engineers to go to work, the city council, and as a legislator, we would come up with ways to make that possible and give those politicians incentives to come up with ways as possible.
All right, thank you. Next question. Can the state revisit the viaduct replacement financing? That is specifically, if the tolling plan as it is, if it drives too much cars to the surface street, is there a mechanism available to change that?
I think it's me.
Yeah, sorry.
I mean, absolutely, issues can always be revisited as we're moving forward, and we can address how we think we might need to actually deal with the debt and the funding for the building of the viaduct, the tunnel. But I think that what we're seeing now, which I think is promising, is an approach hopefully toward the option A, which is the lower tolls, less variability, more consistency for people. And I think what we can see is, as we test that out, does it work? Does it keep those 33,000 cars a day using that pathway, or do we actually see a diversion off of that path? So frankly, it's one of those situations where time is going to have to be the thing that tells us and provides us some examples of how we might need to then come back and readdress either the funding mechanism to make sure, because if we don't have enough folks using it, obviously we won't be able to pay the debt on the building of the tunnel. So I know that folks both regionally, both within this region and at the state, are paying very close attention to this issue, and obviously will continue to do that as we're moving forward.
Well, and definitely that is one idea you need to consider. I think at the state level, you need to keep your eye also on the big picture. So when you have these major highways like 99, this is how goods and services for businesses. And do we need to, is our thinking only to be raising fees such as toll fees to be able to finance this? Or is there a larger picture in which we can support the infrastructure that everybody needs, particularly business? So that's something that's important thinking to bring to Olympia.
I do think we need to consider what that structure for tolling will be. If you look at the 405 example, people thought it was going to take years for them to get to the max tolls, and what was it? It wasn't but a few months, and people were paying $10 to get into the toll lane. So I'm not as worried about people not paying the tolls that are transiting through town. What I worry about is that there's not an exit downtown. So if I can't ride my bike on a day for some reason, I have to go somewhere after work, I have an appointment, I ride the 120. The entire bus, with the exception of maybe 5 people, offloads at 3rd and Seneca, right? So those people are all going downtown. So what do you do with the people right now that can exit? The bus exits off of 99 and goes up Seneca to drop us off. So how do we solve that problem? I worry as a bike commuter downtown. I'm riding through downtown streets to get to light rail. What's going to happen when all those cars that used to be able to go on the viaduct and exit at multiple points downtown can't do that? It really does cause a bottleneck. So I'm not sure if the issue is going to be so much that people won't use the tunnel and pay the tolls, but how do we balance those needs with the minimal surface streets that are available adjacent to where the tunnel will be, with the number of commuters that need to get to pass through that corridor.
So as a person who had to pay the tolls to get home from Everett every day, because the commute got so bad that if I went 405 or I-5 or cut off I-5, went behind Green Lake, it would still take me up to an hour and a half to get home. So my wife and I decided just to go ahead and buy the sticker, put it in our cars, and pay to drive. It feels so silly to pay to drive down a freeway. As I grew up going back and forth across 520s, hanging out with my homeboys on Mercer Island and all that, and different places in Bellevue, and to work in Bellevue because I worked at the grocery warehouse across from the Coke plant in Bellevue. It feels silly to have to pay money to go across. People don't like tolls. We need to understand that. People don't want to be held hostage for tolls to go through anything. So people will use them, but not as many people as optimistic politicians would think. We need to incentivize our politicians to be able to come up with better ways and better strategies so that folks can go home and get to work without having to use surface streets, and that there would be enough exits going through the tunnel or the viaduct or 99 if you want to call it, so that they could get off of downtown, so that people riding a bike would be safe going back and forth. We have to understand that North Dakota used their state bank for transportation, and it's been very, very successful there. We also have that as a model to emulate here. And seeing what's already happened on 405 and the 520 grids, we can see what people will tolerate for tolls.
It's a water sprinkler. Yeah, so we should be able to revisit. I actually don't think that we'll have a problem
maxing out. I came over from 520, it was $4.50, even with a sticker, and it was packed. It still took 45 minutes to come over here. What I do worry about, so everybody said very fantastic things. What I do worry about is that our tolling structure is as regressive as our tax structure in Washington State. I think there should be subsidies in place similar to how we have for our bus passes to make sure that the families who have to drive to work because they can't afford actually to take public transit because they have multiple kids, have to go various routes, can actually afford to go on the public road that they are paying for. So in addition to everything they said, less regressive tolls, having subsidies for families that can't necessarily afford $10 every single day to drive on the tunnel. It's not $10 yet.
Next question is Senator Nelson's second question. The 34th is an urban, suburban, unincorporated urban, and rural district. What are the 3 key issues of the district that you want to address as a legislator? With that in mind. Sophia?
Okay, well, you definitely pointed out the diversity of the district, which definitely is to its advantage and also a challenge for lawmakers. So you said 3 things?
Yeah.
Well, I think it is about implementing and adopting smart policies around housing. When I'm talking to voters, they know that density is probably an inevitable thing, but depending on where you are and who you are, if you are commuting in downtown, they want to see that coupled with transportation. So housing, not only just affordable housing and dense housing, but in other parts of the district, they're really struggling with homelessness. So that coupled with affordable housing as well, and transportation. And then the final one I would say is, I think this is, well, I think that the area is also really admired for its environmental aspects of it, and that's something that we need to really maintain and keep, because that's what people really appreciate about living in this area. So when we talk about really big infrastructure needs and we talk about homelessness and affordable housing, we also need to make sure we maintain that environment that drew people to live here in the first place.
So I think it's important when you go to Olympia to bring some expertise and experience in something. And my expertise and experience crosses 3 really important areas that I think touches everybody in the district. That's children and families. Everybody was a child once. Everybody has a mom and dad. People might not have kids right now, but those issues are really important. Making sure that they're healthy, making sure that we do give them the best start in life so that they don't end up having problems later on. The second issue is K-12 education. I think our schools our classrooms are overcrowded. We're making some progress with McCleary. I honestly think we need to pay our educators more. I volunteered in my kids' classrooms, and I would be an ICU nurse, an ER nurse, before I would try to manage a classroom of 32 kids with 32 different needs, and you've got to meet the needs of all of them at one time. I think they are the heroes of our education system, and they should be compensated for that. And then work on special ed, more funding for special ed. And then the third one is I've been sitting on the child death review in King County for about 20 years. We look at all unexpected deaths of kids under 18, and we see far too many deaths from gun violence. And so I really want to work on measures around gun safety. I don't think any local citizen needs an assault weapon. I think we need to hold gun owners accountable for locking and securing their guns so that people can't get access to them, and we saw far too many deaths of kids in child death review, suicide and homicide, with access to guns.
I think that since we're so diverse, that we have everything that you can imagine in a small area as far as urban and suburban and unincorporated, I would say that we would have to work on leave our environment the way it is, or enhance the environment. It's a beautiful place with the water and the mountains and the snow cap and the green. It's a gorgeous place to look at, even on a cloudy day. I would seek to try to maintain the way our environment looks and cross all borders about it. But as far as people are concerned, I have to agree that families and homes are something that we definitely need to address so that we can have a future. And of course, as a United States Marine, a lot of people associate Marines with violence and guns, but What you don't realize, because I'm the only one here with military experience running for this office, is the very first thing they teach you is safety with your gun. They teach you where to point it, when not to point it, when it should be loaded, how to take it apart, how to clean it. I think we're undereducated on gun safety. I do believe that a civilian should not have an assault weapon, especially if they're not trained. There's 2 weeks of solid training that the military folks go through with an assault weapon. They are incredibly deadly and unbelievably dangerous in the hands of an uneducated person. I think we need to make it as tough to buy a rifle as it is to buy a handgun. I think that as an SPD chaplain, I have to go visit those families whose children have committed suicide. And in some brackets between 8 and 14-year-olds, it's one of the top 5 killers of our children right now.
Just to confirm, the question was, given the diversity of the district, what are the main priorities?
Well, your top 3, yes.
Okay, so we door knock every single day. There's at least 4 or 5 of us out door knocking. Even right now, there's probably folks door knocking on my behalf while we're here. We have a map on our wall with every single precinct, and when we hit a precinct, we put a tag on them. We're nearly done with every single precinct. Michael probably has the exact map. The things that I've heard from folks, at least in this district, have been fully funding education, making sure that we close the achievement gap. Healthcare for all, healthcare as a human right is very, very important, and also having progressive tax reform to make sure that we're able to pay for the services that we need in Washington State as well. There's a whole host of other things as well, including tackling the affordability issue, along with the homelessness issue, specifically in various communities, public safety as well. But those are kind of the main themes that we have. We write them down as we hit precincts, and we keep track of every main issues that we hear, and using that to inform kind of how we would legislate. Because the voices of the people here are the ones that are important that we want to make sure that we're hearing from.
Yes, I think it's very clear that addressing our income inequities is one of the highest priorities for most of the folks in the community and the doors that I've been knocking on as well. And I think to do that, we need to first address our regressive tax system in realistic ways. We need to talk about closing corporate loopholes. We need to talk about the potential of a capital gains tax. We need to look at the B&O tax and where the exemptions are in that to potentially talk about how we might change that up a bit for smaller businesses. I think education is another big one, and not just K through 12, but also early education. I think it's vitally important that the state really steps up for more funding for early education, because that is a place and a space that prepares kids for their K through 12 education, helps families with resources, and really helps to prevent a wide variety of things as kids are moving into their to their K through 12 education. I also, in this district, transportation is a huge issue, and we will always need to continue to address that through both transportation budgeting, through how we are partnering with our communities, through how we are assisting and or potentially the state accidentally throwing up barriers into different transportation planning issues, which we often see, and requires a great deal of engagement with all of these municipalities. I know, again, from my experience at the county, how many people need to be around a table as we are addressing these issues, because there is always a perspective and an experience that folks have had that you don't know about, and how important it is to bring those people together. So I think those are 3 of the priority issues for this district in particular.
Thank you. Next question on education. Lois, this is to you. And I want to remind people these are not necessarily my words, but words from a chamber member. Are we prepared for our robot future?
Are we prepared for our robot future?
What that is with the amount of automation and AI coming in, where they're talking about lawyers losing their jobs to computers. Are we prepared for that kind of a future where that much work is being automated?
I don't know if we are prepared for that. I have a child at the University of Washington, and getting into the programs that look at AI, that look at computer science, that look at engineering is incredibly difficult. There's not enough spots. There aren't enough classes. There aren't enough spots for kids going into those majors. But I think the way to prepare for that, I think that the demand will drive those careers, but we need to start early with early learning. We need to make sure kids that need preschool have access to preschool. Seattle's doing a great job on that. We need to make sure our K-12 education is as good as it can be with the best teachers in front of those kids, and I think the rest will follow. I think that there will be more and more opportunities. Running Start is a great opportunity for kids to start at community college when she's out there making the money sign. It's all about money. So we have to invest. We have to be willing to invest in education to get the outcomes that we need, to get the workforce that we need. And it's not all a 4-year degree. We need to look at career, we need to look at apprenticeship, we need to look at 2-year college, 4-year college, and give kids a wide opportunity to work at every level of the AI infrastructure. That's what I'd say.
Well, having 2 kids and seeing how naturally computer savvy they are, I've learned in the past, I hope he's not here to hear me, but I don't want to know my secret. I've learned
You
in
got
the
his
past few
attention.
weeks, he's actually broken my computer and fixed it before I know it was broken. So children are gravitating toward technology like never before. They will live in an incredibly fast and technologically proficient world. There'll be biotech and nanotech that we can hardly comprehend that they just breeze through. If you don't believe that, ask your kid to text a message for you and watch how fast their little thumbs move. They're able to write something faster than we can understand that they're writing it. Are we prepared for a robot society? Not exactly. I worked on the 777 where we decided to have robots build the airplane and have people watch. Absolute disaster as it started out. You have to have people tune those things in and dial those things in. We've got a ways to go before we go to a whole robot society, and that means we have time to prepare for it. Robots will never be able to do everything for you. They'll never be able to match the skills and the sensitivity that a person has. The best thing we can do is tune them in to where they can help us the best. But our youth of the day, with their video games and their PC savvy, I think they're prepared better than we are for it.
Hi. So I'm actually a senior manager at Microsoft, and I work on a team called Worldwide Learning. We actually build job training resources specifically for 21st century learning, which includes machine learning, artificial intelligence, data science, things that did not exist when I was a kindergartner. So one of the biggest things that we focus on at Microsoft, specifically for this issue that we're seeing, is actually how do you not just have job training programs to help transition folks from whatever position they are into a more technologically driven economy. It's actually teaching people to learn. So a lot of the jobs that kindergartners today will get when they actually graduate don't actually exist yet. So what we need to do is actually provide a space and a capacity for them to learn because it's going to change and it will be technologically driven. So this is actually something that I do on a daily basis at work.
No, I don't think we are prepared for the robot future. And I think we do. I think education is a big key to it. I think that we also really need to be working with all of our trade unions, our service unions, the folks who are standing up now for working families who are doing the kind of work that are in fear of having their jobs replaced by technology. We need to bring all of those people together to start working together about the ways we can continue to have families have living wages as they work. They are on the ground. They are the ones experiencing what it means in the service industry, what it means in the trades. And I think that they are going to be a key to helping us make this transition. It can't just be the folks from the top down who are really have all the technology, know how they want to use it. We also have to really be making sure we're working with those community members, with those workers, to bring them together, to come up with some solutions and some plans as we are moving forward. I am really proud to be endorsed by every union that has endorsed in this race, and it includes trade unions, it includes service unions. They are sometimes in conflict with each other, but they understand that I'm somebody who knows how to work with all of those people, that I'm somebody who knows how to try to come to collaboration to get to the end goal, and I believe this is one of those issues where it's going to be really important to have all of those people at the table together.
Well, I think the short answer is no, we're not ready for that type of society, but actually coming from a people profession, technology for us is really a tool to do our work better. So I'm the executive director of the Center for Nursing, and so we're in the group of workforce development businesses, and so we're really tuned in on recruitment and retention of nursing students and nurses, because we need more of them as our communities age and healthcare gets more complex. And really, there are some students, and I'll just say our student population is growing more diverse the Office of the Superintendent of Public Instruction, 56% of students in kindergarten today identify with a community of color. And we also have to recognize that a lot of students are diverse in terms of the way they learn. So when we ask students, what are some effective tools to recruit and retain nursing students, there are some students that want the brick and mortar school. They like the face-to-face instruction. And there are some other students that like more of that convenience that technology can provide. So I think that we still need to make sure that we don't have a one-size-fits-all in terms of technology and the use of education. And if we're able to do a good job with that, then we do prepare students for these more high-tech jobs when they're ready to go and work.
All right, thank you. Robot future. Lev, will you revisit the increased property tax structure brought on by the McCleary decision to help our seniors and folks on fixed incomes?
The short slang answer is duh, obviously. Property taxes are outrageous here over in West Seattle, probably in Seattle as a whole. There are a lot of people that live in different neighborhoods that are paying $8,000 to $10,000 a year in just property taxes. You would have to revisit those. There should be nothing that should stop you from revisiting any error. Anytime you put something up or do something in your own yard, if it isn't good enough, you go back and try and fix it again. The same thing is consistent with our property taxes. At some point, wherein are they going to level off? It has nothing to do with the housing prices. Housing prices are going to continue to go up. We need to put something in the interim so that property taxes can slow down. And we won't end up like a couple years ago on Mercer Island. We had a $400,000 a year property tax. They didn't pay that much for a house, but it's costing them that much money. We currently have a lady, older lady, who bought a house in the Lake Washington area years ago for 50 grand. Now they want 20 grand from a senior citizen a year for property tax. That's just not right. At some point, there should be a cap to where we can let it for property taxes, and we'll have to look elsewhere to fund different things here in the state.
We just need overall a compromise on our tax structure in Washington State specifically. So obviously, right now, because of the way that our regressive tax structure works, we have property taxes, we have sales taxes, and we have some B&O. In order for us to actually alleviate the burden that we have on working class families and senior citizens and people on fixed income, we actually have to have a progressive tax reform to actually make it work. One of the things that we've heard before is when people say, oh, your property tax is going up, oh, it's because your house is worth more. Well, people that are on fixed income that are renting may not necessarily be able to tap that equity, right? So this is an issue that we're seeing right now that needs to be addressed right now as well. And this is part of that progressive tax reform that we've been talking about.
When it comes specifically to property taxes, I absolutely think we need to address, particularly for seniors, expanding the exemption for property taxes. Because again, the state has not done their job and has left local municipalities with very limited tools with which we can raise revenue. So we depend on raising either sales taxes or property taxes to fund our schools, to fund our human services programs, to fund our veterans, seniors, and human services levy. That is the position we are in because the state has continued to not address the regressive tax system. So I think with property taxes, there are some things we need to be doing around the edges to make sure we've got exemptions, to make sure that we're closing those corporate loopholes, to make sure we're trying to find other sources of income, and then demonstrating that we will lower those taxes on working families. Sales tax is the largest revenue generator in this state. B&O tax, I believe it comes in second place. We have got to figure out a way to shift that so we are not taxing work, but we're taxing wealth, that we can have an adjustment there and a balance. But I think we have to earn the trust of taxpayers to do it. I think we have to demonstrate that if we're going to find a different revenue source and raise a different piece of revenue, we're going to lower a piece somewhere else. I want to see that happen. I want to be a part of helping to make that happen. And I believe once we start that ball moving and we can demonstrate success to taxpayers, demonstrate that we're accountable, we will build that trust, and we will get to the place we want to be to not be the most regressive tax system in this country.
Well, and I would use caution also to tie in that question, and we're tying property taxes to K-12. And hands down, when I talk to voters in the district, they want a more fair system. And that's very surprising, and a lot of them are seniors who are really fearful of being priced out of their home. So and they want that change now, because I think that we've been kind of nibbling around the edges, talking about something that's more fair, and people understanding that there's just huge wealth in a region, and so why aren't people paying their fair share is something that I hear every single day. And when we have a more fair structure, then we can address systems like our K-12 and what McCleary is trying to address, in that not only do we have more students, but we have a more diversity in type of students. For decades now, it's been an entitlement for students who have severe health issues to attend public schools, and we need resources for them as well. So we absolutely need a more progressive tax structure so that we can finance and support the investments that are necessary in K-12 to keep up with our population of kids and grow that workforce that we need for the future. And we need to do it today.
So I agree with what a lot of folks have said. I would not pull the money immediately from K-12. We just gave them some money. It'd be like pulling the carpet out from under their feet. So we do need to solve the problem, though. Right now, the low-income earners in our state pay 17% of their income in taxes. The highest earners pay 2% of their income in taxes. That's not fair. People aren't paying their fair share, right? So the people that can least afford to pay those taxes are paying the highest percent. The people that can most afford to have some of their income go to more tax are paying only 2%. So we need a broader revenue source. And I think right now we only have sales tax, property tax, and a few B&O taxes. So everything gets lumped on either we increase the sales tax, gas tax, we increase the property tax. If we have a broader source of revenue, I'm going to say the evil word income tax. I'm not talking about income tax on top of our current tax structure. We have to level out our current tax structure and look at what people are paying. The upper income that are paying only 2% certainly can probably afford to pay a higher percent of their income in taxes. The lower income who are paying most of their taxes through sales tax wouldn't get taxed. It would be an income-based tax. So I don't think it's on top of our current tax structure, but we need to level it out, and then we need to examine our priorities and fund those things that are going to get us the best return on investment for those investments.
Thank you. So I think we're back to Joe, is that correct? So we are the Chamber of Commerce. Take a moment and explain to us how you understand business, especially small business, and what kind of a tax burden small business is confronted with in Seattle.
I think even more than just tax burden. So my family, when we first came over here, we actually had a small business in White Center, and that was how we got started. So small businesses are the economic drivers for most jobs in Washington State. We actually have a family business. It's an engineering firm that my sister runs right now. It's also in West Seattle. I've actually helped a few West Seattle businesses, not just start, but also get going as well, doing some consulting and building out websites and doing marketing plans for them as well. So extensive experience. My background is actually in finance and economics, so I spent most of my career growing up was actually working in business, working a lot with individuals addressing issues around funding for their business as well. So part of it is not just the taxes that you are paying, but also the ability to even get financing to start your business in the first place. So in Seattle specific, which I think maybe what you're referring to, there's obviously a whole host of issues there. One of the things that we could do is, it's maybe of a tangent, but healthcare costs I know is a burden for a lot of small businesses. Being able to have a single-payer healthcare system that would relieve that burden from the businesses, I think would be tremendous. I actually want to get rid of B&O for small and medium-sized businesses, to be honest. I think it's regressive and it stops small businesses from growing. And I want to be able to actually invest in more SBA loans and lending for small businesses to start. State bank can fit in there, but I'll digress.
Thank you.
Yes, so I had the experience, my family, when I was young, my dad had a dream of opening a restaurant, and he did. It's called Texas Barbecue in Bellingham, Washington, and he partnered with a friend, and they opened that restaurant, and it only made it about a year, because location. And so that business failed, and I saw what that experience did to my family. At the same time, my mother had a business, which will demonstrate my age. It was text type, so it was a typesetting business, and she was actually very successful in that business. And it was a woman-owned, women-run business, something that she was really proud of. And when the restaurant failed, we had to sell the other business to bail it out because we would have been in such financial crisis. So I have seen what it takes, the energy that it takes, the commitment that it takes to run small businesses. And I don't think they're just the economic drivers, they're really a community asset as far as building community. I mean, I think we've certainly seen in our communities, all of them here in the 34th, what small business does to bring our communities together. So I would continue, if I were to be elected state senator, continue to look at all of these issues, ask folks from the small business communities to come to me, to talk to me about what the barriers are, where we're doubling up on both city and state taxes, for examples, and fees, any of those numbers of issues. But I would want the community, I would come into the community, talk with the small business community, and get a better understanding, both of the things that might be new and needed and the barriers that are in place now so that we could address those.
So I'm currently the executive director of a nonprofit organization that's small. We have 4 employees, including myself. So for the last 4 years now, I have the challenges of recruiting talent without falling short of competitive salaries. Also trying to figure out how do you grow revenue when there's much more demand on what your business is to produce based on the demand from the community itself. And so I think this nonprofit background, recognizing also that for for-profit businesses, they have different needs as well. Small businesses has also different needs than big businesses. And actually the state of Washington has been known to be a really good place for large business. But unless we change, and this is what I've learned from talking with constituents in the business world here in the district, what business owners want is also very much what community members want. They would like they want affordable housing, they want transportation, they want a good education system so that they have the workforce of the future. And unless we speed up the progress that we need, businesses at best will stay the same or stagnant, and at the worst, they're going to leave because they won't have what they need here in the state of Washington.
So I think we've been blessed both in West Seattle, White Center, Burien. We've seen a period of growth in the last few years where a lot of businesses are coming in, small businesses are starting. Downtown White Center is a great example. We see a lot more businesses in West Seattle. People travel to West Seattle to take advantage of those businesses. We do need to listen to those folks who are running those businesses, who are trying to start businesses, and who are trying to maintain and compete in those businesses to understand what they need. So when I talked about my desire to go to the legislature to bring the needs of our community forward, that's what I would see my mission with small businesses, to promote that vibrancy that they bring to the communities, because they build community. Where are people gathering? They're gathering in the businesses. Meet me down in the Junction, meet me in White Center, meet me down in Burien. We didn't say that 10 years ago. We were like, where can we go? What's out there? So I think really staying in touch with business owners and understanding what they need and bringing that voice to Olympia to the table to work with the Democratic caucus to figure out how we better support the whole range of business community.
I think one of the things we have to understand is how important small businesses are to our community, how they grow the different communities. When I was a child, my dad owned a janitorial small business where he would go down to the International District and he would clean the banks and different small businesses down there. I remember that fondly until I got fired by him pretty much for setting off a bank alarm. The button looked like a doorbell, so I had to hit it a couple times. Nowadays, they'd probably shoot everybody in the bank before they came in and said, what's going on? But as a small business owner, there are things that they need to know. I think we need to educate them and possibly start giving them the same kind of tax breaks that we give the big companies. We need to get them to understand that back in 1993, one of our legislators passed a bill, actually, way back then. It was actually called House Bill 1493. It was a linked deposit program to where they would help fund small businesses. I think if we educated our small businesses to let them know this is what you have available to you, they would not only start up better, and they'd start up with more resources, but they would go continually longer and longer. They would actually get bigger and bigger. Some people don't want to have a big, gigantic corporation, but they want to have a neighborhood or a small city business. I think if we educate them on what's available to them, I think that would go a long way. And like the dear friend Lois said, sit down and talk to them and find out what's bothering them, what they need help with, and then listen to what they say. And then we would take that to Olympia and discuss it with our other colleagues and see what kind of help we can get them.
Okay, thank you. Finally, last question, yes, no? Do you support an income tax? Janet?
Yes,
Sophia?
Yes.
I think I already said that, yes.
I have to as well.
Yes.
All right. So then, start with you, Sophia. Take a minute, just a final word.
Well, I look forward to, if I'm so lucky to be elected, to represent this district and bring my experience that I've had from Olympia, from advocacy, because I could probably take another few hours about, how is the sausage made, as we know, in Olympia, and have my existing relationships with legislators that are already there. There's also key staff, which is really key to hit the ground running. I think that my work in healthcare is really key experience in terms of moving really big legislation that needs to be done in Olympia. And I'm also really proud of being the sole endorsed candidate for NARAL Pro-Choice Washington. And I'll say that because it's part of the larger picture of enabling and empowering women who want to have that successful family and career and be able to be planful for their life and attend to their family planning when something arises. And I'll just say from a person, I don't have time for a personal story. So anyway, thank you.
You know, they say if you want something to happen, you just say that you're going to do it. So when I'm in Olympia, I will be committed to being a legislator who has done what I've admired in others, and that is staying in touch with the constituents, not only in the 34th District, but in the systems that the state supports, to understand, again, what's working for people, what's not working for people, what ideas and solutions do they have, and how do we bring that back to Olympia and put it in the mix and work on that funding for those issues that are important. We are representatives. I would be your representative in Olympia, bringing your concerns to Olympia to get work done on them. So that would be my pledge to you.
What I would like to happen, or cause to happen as your state senator, is I would bring all of my experience as clergy, as a United States Marine, as working with the Employees Community Fund, as feeding the homeless, as a union steward advocating with management and union members, as having to go down to Olympia with my union to make life better. I would take that to Olympia and be able to work across both aisles and be able to speak to people who I don't know or don't necessarily agree, because there's always going to be middle ground that's going to be available to all of us. I would work hard to find that middle ground because, as you know, we're not always going to get our way. We're not always, everything's not going to always be from our best understanding. You're going to have to listen to other people and sometimes meet in the middle. And I would take that experience of being able to work with people who have an opposite view that I have down there and be your representative.
First off, thank you so much for the time and opportunity to speak. We're honestly very lucky in the 34th to have a very great selection of candidates for state senate. So I want to say thank you to everybody here for being here in the first place. Honestly, we have a lot of similar views. I think the main thing that we need to worry about when we're picking our candidates is do you have that same experience and same lived shared values as they do, making sure that they're part of your experience. So I was born and raised here. This community shaped my values. This community gave me a chance. And I'm ready to serve in the Senate because this community prepared me. I believe that politics is about people and not careers, and it is my goal to make sure that we represent all communities in the 34th once I'm in the legislature.
Thank you so much. I am a single mom, head of household, who also, works outside of the home to support my 3 kids. That is a perspective that is often missing from our elected bodies because it's really challenging to be able to do that and fit in an elected position. I believe that perspective, the work that I've done in this community, the work that I've done with nonprofits, for nonprofits, I've worked in the private sector, I've worked at the state level, the federal level, and the local government level. I have worked to demonstrate effective moving of legislation, passing progressive legislation in a bipartisan body at the King County Council. I have been doing that for 8 years. I've worked for the executive for the past 2 years, managing council relations. So this is a job that I am prepared to start on day one as your state senator should I be elected, and it would be a privilege to continue to work with these communities in the 34th District, and I would really appreciate your support. Thank you.
That's it. Thank you all so much for coming. Thank you guys.